The funny thing about marriage is that it's a lot like fixing cars. You spend years maintaining something that eventually breaks down anyway, and when it does, everyone acts surprised. My name is Anthony Miller, and I've been running Miller's Auto Shop for 15 years. I fix engines for a living, but apparently I couldn't fix my own marriage. Not that I'm bitter or anything. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. It was a Tuesday morning when I first noticed the cracks in my supposedly perfect life. I was under the hood of a '98 Camaro, wrestling with a stubborn alternator, when I heard my wife Brooke talking to her best friend Jenna in the office. Now, I wasn't eavesdropping. The walls in my shop are about as thick as tissue paper, and those two could wake anyone when they got going. "I'm just saying, Anthony's sweet and all," Brooke was saying. "But sometimes a girl needs a real man, you know? Someone who doesn't come home covered in grease every night." Jenna's cackle could strip paint. "Girl, you need someone like my Kyle. Now that's a man who knows how to handle things." Kyle Maddox, ex-cop turned private security, all swagger and biceps. The kind of guy who probably flexed in the mirror while brushing his teeth. I'd met him a few times at neighborhood barbecues, where he'd spend the entire time talking about his war stories, from his 5 years on the force and showing off his lifted F-150. "Kyle's definitely impressive," Brooke said, and I could practically hear the smile in her voice. I slammed the hood harder than necessary. Rico, my 23-year-old mechanic, looked up from the transmission he was rebuilding. "Everything okay, boss?" "Just peachy, Rico, just peachy." That afternoon, I decided to surprise Brooke. We'd been married 8 years, and things had been rocky lately. She'd been working late at the department store, coming home tired and distant. I figured maybe a grand gesture would help. I'd been saving up for months to buy her that silver Honda CR-V she'd been eyeing at Patterson's dealership. It was supposed to be an anniversary gift, but why wait? I spent 2 hours at the dealership, going through paperwork, arranging financing, the whole 9 yards. The salesman, a eager kid named Tommy, was practically bouncing with excitement as he handed me the keys. "She's gonna love it, Mr. Miller. This model's got everything. Heated seats, backup camera, premium sound system." "Yeah, she'll love it," I said, though something in my gut was already telling me this was a mistake. I drove the CR-V home, parked it in our driveway with a big red bow I'd bought at the grocery store, and waited. Brooke's shift ended at 6, and she usually got home by 6:30. At 7:15, I called her cell. "Hey, babe, where are you? I've got a surprise waiting." "Oh, I'm still at work. Inventory night. Might be really late." "On a Tuesday?" "Yeah, you know how it is. Listen, I gotta go. Love you." The line went silent. I stared at the phone, then at the shiny new SUV in my driveway. Something was definitely wrong. Brooke had never mentioned inventory on Tuesday nights before. In fact, I was pretty sure their inventory was always on Sundays. I called the store. Janet, the night manager, picked up. "Miller's department store. Janet speaking?" "Hey, Janet, it's Anthony Miller, Brooke's husband. Is she still there?" "Brooke?" "No, honey. She left at her regular time. Around 6, I think. Is everything okay?" My stomach dropped. "Yeah, everything's fine. Thanks, Janet." I hung up and sat on my front porch, staring at that CR-V. The bow looked ridiculous now, like a joke I wasn't in on. Where was my wife? And why was she lying about it? Around 10:30, Brooke's car pulled into the driveway. She got out looking flustered, her hair slightly messed up, lipstick gone. She stopped when she saw the Honda. "Anthony, what's this?" "Your anniversary gift. Surprise." I tried to keep my voice level. "How was inventory?" "Oh, it was long. Really long." She wouldn't meet my eyes. "This is beautiful, honey. But you shouldn't have spent the money." "Where were you really, Brooke?" The question hung in the air like exhaust fumes. She looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Calculation. Like she was deciding which lie to tell. "I told you, inventory. Look, I'm exhausted. Can we talk about this tomorrow?" She grabbed her purse from her car and headed for the house. As she walked past me, I caught a whiff of cologne. Not mine. Something expensive and musky. The kind of cologne an ex-cop with an ego might wear. That night, I lay awake listening to Brooke's breathing, trying to make sense of what was happening. 8 years of marriage, and suddenly I felt like I was living with a stranger. When I finally fell asleep, I dreamed about engines that wouldn't start, no matter how hard I tried to fix them. The next morning, Brooke was gone before I woke up. She'd left a note on the kitchen counter. "Taking the Honda to show Mom. Thanks again, XOXO." At least she was driving the gift. That had to count for something, right? I got to the shop early and threw myself into work. There's something therapeutic about fixing things that actually can be fixed. I was replacing brake pads on a Nissan when Rico wandered over with a cup of coffee and a concerned expression. "Boss, you look like hell." "Thanks for the pep talk, Rico." "Seriously, what's going on? You've been weird since yesterday." Rico had been working for me for 3 years. He was a good kid, smart, loyal, and had an uncanny ability to diagnose problems just by listening to an engine. He was also the closest thing I had to a friend these days. Most of my old buddies had drifted away over the years, busy with their own families and careers. "Just marriage stuff," I said. "Nothing I can't handle." "Want to talk about it?" "Not really." But as the day wore on, I found myself telling Rico everything. The conversation I'd overheard, Brooke's lie about working late, the cologne, the way she'd looked at me like she was trying to decide something. Rico listened without judgment, occasionally nodding or making sympathetic noises. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "So what are you going to do?" "I don't know. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe there's an innocent explanation." "Maybe," Rico said, but his tone suggested he didn't believe it any more than I did. That evening, I decided to test my theory. I called Brooke at work around 5:30. "Hey, what time will you be home tonight?" "Oh, probably the usual time. Why?" "Just wondering if you wanted me to pick up dinner." "Sure, that sounds great. I'll see you around 6:30. I hung up and drove to the department store. I parked across the street with a clear view of the employee exit and waited. At 6:15, Brooke came out, but instead of heading toward home, she turned left and drove toward downtown. I followed, keeping my distance. She pulled into the parking lot of the Riverside Inn, a mid-range hotel near the business district. I watched as she got out of the Honda and walked toward the entrance. She moved with purpose, like someone who'd done this before. 5 minutes later, a familiar black F-150 pulled into the lot. Kyle Maddox got out, looked around casually, then headed for the same entrance. He was wearing a tight polo shirt that showed off his arms and a cocky smile that made me want to punch something. I sat in my truck for another hour, my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. When they finally came out, they weren't touching, but they didn't need to. The way Kyle looked at her, the way she smiled at him, it told the whole story. I drove home and ordered pizza. When Brooke arrived at 8:30, she was full of apologies. "Sorry I'm late, honey. Traffic was terrible, and then I ran into Jenna at the grocery store and we got talking." "No problem," I said. "Pizza's on the counter." She looked surprised. "You already ate?" "Yeah, I was hungry." We spent the evening watching TV in silence. Brooke kept checking her phone, smiling at messages I couldn't see. Every buzz made my jaw clench a little tighter. "Anyone important?" I asked after the 5th or 6th message. "Just Jenna. You know how she is." I knew how Jenna was, all right. She was Kyle Maddox's on-and-off girlfriend, and apparently she was helping my wife cheat on me. Over the next few days, I started paying attention to things I'd been ignoring. The way Brooke dressed for work. More makeup, tighter clothes, perfume I hadn't bought her. The way she guarded her phone like it contained state secrets. The way she found excuses to stay out late or leave early. I also started noticing things about our social circle. Jenna was suddenly Brooke's best friend again, after months of barely speaking. They were having girls' nights twice a week, and whenever Kyle's name came up in conversation, Brooke got a particular look on her face, the same look she used to get when she talked about me back when we were dating. The breaking point came on Friday night. Brooke announced she was going out with Jenna and some other girls from work. "Don't wait up," she said, kissing me on the cheek. "We might make a night of it." "Have fun," I said, but I was already making plans. An hour after she left, I drove to Flanagan's Pub, the dive bar where Jenna liked to hold court. Sure enough, there was Brooke's Honda in the parking lot, right next to Kyle's truck. I went inside. The place was crowded and dimly lit, perfect for not being noticed. I found a corner booth with a good view of the bar and ordered a beer. It didn't take long to spot them. Brooke and Kyle were sitting at a high-top table near the back, their heads close together, her hand on his arm. They looked like teenagers sneaking around behind their parents' backs. Jenna was there too, along with 2 other women I recognized from the department store. They were all laughing at something Kyle had said, but it was clear the real show was happening between him and my wife. I watched them for an hour, nursing my beer and fighting the urge to walk over there and cause a scene, but I'm not that guy. I don't make public spectacles. I fix things quietly, methodically, the same way I approach a complicated engine problem. As I was getting ready to leave, I overheard something that changed everything. Kyle had gotten up to use the restroom, and the women were talking among themselves. "I can't believe Brooke's actually going through with this," one of them was saying. "It's about time," Jenna replied. "Anthony's a nice guy, but he's so boring. Kyle knows how to treat a woman." "What about the shop?" another woman asked. "Doesn't Anthony own that auto place?" "That's the beauty of it," Jenna said, lowering her voice. "Kyle's got connections. Once Brooke files for divorce, she'll get half of everything. Kyle knows a guy who can make sure the business gets valued real low, then they can buy it cheap and flip it." This wasn't just an affair. This was a setup. They were planning to destroy my life and profit from it. "What if Anthony fights it?" the first woman asked. Brooke spoke up for the first time. "He won't. He's too nice. He'll just roll over and take it like he always does." I left the bar feeling like I'd been sucker punched. But underneath the hurt and anger, something else was building, a cold, calculating fury that reminded me why I was good at fixing things. You have to understand how something works before you can take it apart. Over the weekend, I started gathering information. I went through our financial records, made copies of everything important, and documented every lie Brooke had told me. I also did some research on Kyle Maddox. Turns out, Kyle wasn't quite the success story he pretended to be. His private security company was struggling, he'd been sued twice by former clients, and he owed back taxes. He needed money, and my successful auto shop looked like an easy target. I also discovered something else interesting. Kyle was still technically married. His divorce from his first wife hadn't been finalized yet, which meant his relationship with Brooke could be considered adultery in court. That might come in handy. On Monday morning, I called my lawyer, Dave Brennan. We'd gone to high school together, and he'd handled the legal work when I bought the shop. "Anthony, good to hear from you. What can I do for you?" "I need to talk to you about protecting my assets, Dave, and I need to do it quietly." "That sounds ominous. Everything okay?" "Not really. Can you meet me for lunch today?" We met at a diner downtown, away from the shop and Brooke's workplace. I told Dave everything, the affair, the conversation I'd overheard, Kyle's financial situation, even the detail about his ongoing divorce. Dave listened carefully, taking notes on a legal pad. When I finished, he leaned back in his booth and whistled softly. "Jesus, Anthony, I'm sorry. That's rough. Can they really do what they're planning? The business valuation scam? It's possible, but not if we're prepared for it. The good news is that you've got time to protect yourself. The bad news is that divorce proceedings can get ugly, especially when there's this much money involved." "What do you recommend?" "First, we make sure all your business assets are properly documented and valued. I know a guy who can do an independent appraisal. Second, we start gathering evidence of the affair. Third, we look into this Kyle character's background. If he's as shady as you think, we might find something useful." "What about the adultery angle?" "Illinois is a no-fault divorce state, so adultery doesn't technically matter for the divorce itself, but it could affect spousal support, and if we can prove they conspired to defraud you, that's a whole different ballgame." I felt better having a plan, even if it meant accepting that my marriage was over. That evening, I started documenting everything. Every lie, every late night, every suspicious phone call. I set up a small digital recorder in the kitchen, where Brooke liked to take her private calls. I also installed a GPS tracker on her car, not to stalk her, but to establish a pattern of deception. The evidence piled up quickly. Hotel receipts in her purse, text messages she thought she'd deleted, credit card charges at restaurants where she'd supposedly been working late. It was almost insulting how careless she was being. The most damaging evidence came from the recorder. 3 days after I installed it, I captured a phone conversation between Brooke and Kyle that laid out their entire plan. "How much longer do we have to keep this up?" Brooke was saying. "I'm getting tired of pretending." "Just a few more weeks," Kyle replied. "My guy needs time to set up the business evaluation. Once that's in place, you file papers and we move fast." "What if Anthony gets suspicious?" "He's a grease monkey, not a detective. Besides, even if he figures it out, what's he going to do? He's too much of a wimp to fight back." "You're right. God, I can't wait to be done with this charade. Living with him is like being married to a mechanic." "Hey, you are married to a mechanic," Kyle laughed. "Not for much longer." I sat in my kitchen listening to this conversation, and something inside me snapped. Not the explosive kind of snap that leads to violence or stupidity. The cold, precise kind of snap that leads to very careful planning. They thought I was a wimp. They thought I was too stupid to figure out their game. They thought I'd just roll over and let them destroy everything I'd worked for. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The next phase of my plan required patience. I continued acting like the oblivious husband while secretly documenting everything. I also started making some changes they wouldn't notice right away. First, I moved money, not illegally, Dave made sure of that, but I shifted funds into accounts that would be harder for them to access quickly. I also accelerated some business investments I'd been considering, converting liquid assets into equipment and inventory that would be harder to undervalue. Second, I started building alliances. I reached out to some old friends I'd lost touch with, including a few who worked in law enforcement and private investigation. I also strengthened my relationship with my business contacts, suppliers, customers, other shop owners. If Kyle's plan was to isolate me, I was going to make sure I had support. Third, I began gathering intelligence on Kyle himself. This is where having friends in law enforcement came in handy. Kyle's record wasn't as clean as he pretended. He'd been investigated for insurance fraud a few years back, though charges were never filed. His security company had lost several contracts due to unprofessional conduct, and his financial situation was even worse than I'd thought. But the most interesting thing I learned about Kyle came from an unexpected source. Rico had a cousin who worked for the city, and she'd mentioned that Kyle's truck, the one he was so proud of, wasn't properly registered. The title was still in his ex-wife's name, and he was driving it without proper insurance. That's interesting, I told Rico when he shared this information. Very interesting. Why? What are you thinking, boss? I'm thinking that people who live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. The confrontation I'd been dreading finally came on a Thursday night in November. Brooke had been acting especially distant, and I could tell she was working up the courage to make her move. She'd been staying out later, being more careless with her lies, and I'd caught her looking at apartment listings online. I was in the garage, working on my own truck, when she came out to talk to me. She was dressed up, nice jeans, a sweater that showed off her figure, makeup done perfectly. She looked beautiful, and for a moment, I remembered why I'd fallen in love with her. Anthony, we need to talk. I didn't look up from the engine. About what? About us. About our marriage. What about it? She took a deep breath. I think we should separate. I finally looked at her. Why? We've grown apart. We want different things. I need more. More what? More excitement, more passion, more everything. She was getting agitated, probably because I wasn't reacting the way she'd expected. You're a good man, Anthony, but we're just not compatible anymore. I see. And this has nothing to do with Kyle Maddox? Her face went pale. What? Kyle? Why would you? Cut the crap, Brooke. I know about the affair. I know about the hotel. I know about your little plan to steal my business. For a moment, she looked genuinely shocked. Then her expression hardened. You've been spying on me. I've been protecting myself. There's a difference. How dare you? You have no right to. I have every right to know what my wife is doing with my money and my business. She crossed her arms and glared at me. Fine. Yes, I'm seeing Kyle. Yes, I want a divorce. And yes, I'm going to get half of everything, including this precious shop of yours. No, you're not. What do you mean, no? It's community property. I'm entitled to half. I wiped my hands on a rag and smiled at her. You're entitled to half of what exists when we got married, plus half of any legitimate marital assets accumulated since then. You're not entitled to anything you tried to steal through fraud. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you do. Kyle's buddy who was going to undervalue the business, the plan to buy it cheap and flip it, the whole conspiracy to defraud me. I know all about it, Brooke. I have recordings. The color drained from her face completely. You're bluffing. I pulled out my phone and played back part of her conversation with Kyle. Her own voice filled the garage. Living with him is like being married to a mechanic. She stared at the phone, then at me. You bastard. I'm a bastard. I'm not the one who spent 8 months planning to destroy someone who loved them. I never loved you, she screamed. I settled for you. Kyle is twice the man you'll ever be. Kyle is a broke loser who's using you to pay his debts. But you're too stupid to see it. She slapped me. Hard. I didn't react, just stood there looking at her. Get out, I said quietly. This is my house, too. Actually, it's not. The house is in my name only. I bought it 2 years before we got married. You can pack your things and leave, or I can call the police and have you removed for assault. You can't do this. Watch me. She stormed back into the house. 20 minutes later, she came out with 2 suitcases and a look of pure hatred. This isn't over, Anthony. Kyle won't let you get away with this. Tell Kyle I said hello. She threw the suitcases in the Honda and peeled out of the driveway. I went back to working on my truck, but my hands were shaking. 8 years of marriage, over in 20 minutes of brutal honesty. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. Kyle showed up at the shop the next morning with 2 of his security company buddies. They looked like they'd stepped out of a bad action movie. Black tactical gear, sunglasses, the works. I was under the hood of a Chevy when they walked in. "Miller," Kyle's voice echoed through the shop. I didn't look up. "We're closed." "Like hell you are. We need to talk." "I don't have anything to say to you, Kyle." "Well, I got plenty to say to you." I finally straightened up and looked at him. He was bigger than I remembered and angrier. His two buddies flanked him like bodyguards. "Okay, talk." "You think you're real smart, don't you? Recording private conversations, spying on people. I think I'm smart enough not to let a washed-up cop and his girlfriend steal my business." "Nobody's stealing anything. Brooke's entitled to half." "Brooke's entitled to what the law says she's entitled to, not what you two cooked up in your little conspiracy." Kyle stepped closer. "You know what your problem is, Miller. You don't know when you're outmatched. You're a small-time grease monkey trying to play in the big leagues. And you're a broke security guard trying to live off my wife's divorce settlement." That hit home. Kyle's face flushed red, and he took another step forward. "You better watch your mouth." "Or what? You'll assault me in front of witnesses? That would really help Brooke's case, wouldn't it?" I glanced around the shop. Rico was standing near the back, holding a tire iron. 2 customers were watching from the waiting area, and I was pretty sure the security camera was getting all of this. Kyle seemed to realize he was being recorded. He forced a smile and backed off slightly. "Look, Miller, let's be reasonable. Brooke wants out of the marriage. You can make this easy, or you can make it hard. But either way, it's going to happen." "You're right. The marriage is over. But that doesn't mean you get to rob me." "Nobody's robbing anybody. We just want what's fair." Fair would have been Brooke asking for a divorce before she started screwing around. Fair would have been not planning to defraud me. Fair would have been treating me with basic human decency. She tried to talk to you. You wouldn't listen. She tried to manipulate me. There's a difference. Kyle's patience was running out. "You know what? Fine. Do this the hard way. But don't say I didn't warn you." "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise." He turned and walked out, his buddies following. Rico came over as soon as they were gone. "Boss, you okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine. But I think things are about to get interesting." I was right. Over the next 2 weeks, Kyle and Brooke launched a campaign of harassment that would have been impressive if it wasn't so pathetic. It started with phone calls, late-night hang-ups, threatening messages, the usual amateur hour intimidation tactics. Then they escalated to vandalism. Someone threw a brick through the shop's front window with a note attached, "Pay up or else." They also tried to sabotage my business relationships. Brooke called several of my regular customers, claiming I was having a mental breakdown and suggesting they take their cars elsewhere. Kyle contacted my suppliers, spreading rumors that I was having financial problems and might not be able to pay my bills, but their biggest mistake was underestimating me. Every threat, every act of vandalism, every attempt at sabotage was documented and reported to the police. I also hired a private investigator to keep tabs on Kyle's activities. What we discovered was a pattern of behavior that went back years. Kyle had been involved in at least 3 other relationships where he'd convinced women to leave their husbands and share their divorce settlements with him. In one case, he'd actually married the woman, then divorced her and taken half of what she'd gotten from her first husband. He was a professional homewrecker, and Brooke was just his latest mark. Armed with this information, Dave and I went on the offensive. We filed for a restraining order against Kyle, citing the threats and harassment. We also filed a civil lawsuit for attempted fraud and conspiracy. But the real coup came when we discovered that Kyle's security company was operating without proper licensing. A few phone calls to the right people at the state regulatory agency, and suddenly Kyle was facing fines and potential criminal charges. The pressure was getting to both of them. Brooke called me one evening, crying and begging me to work things out. "It doesn't have to be like this, Anthony. We can be civilized about this." "You should have thought about that before you tried to rob me." "I never wanted to hurt you. Kyle said it would be easy, that you wouldn't fight back." Kyle was wrong. "Please, can't we just forget about all this and get a simple divorce? I'll take whatever the court says is fair." "It's too late for that, Brooke. You made your choice." "What do you want from me?" "I want you to face the consequences of what you've done. Both of you." The final confrontation came in December at the preliminary hearing for the restraining order. Kyle showed up with a lawyer, not a good one, judging by his cheap suit and nervous demeanor. Brooke was there too, looking haggard and desperate. Dave had prepared thoroughly. He presented evidence of the harassment, the threats, the attempted fraud, and Kyle's pattern of behavior with other women. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, listened carefully and asked pointed questions. When it was Kyle's lawyer's turn, he tried to paint me as a vindictive husband who was using the legal system to get revenge on his cheating wife. It might have worked if we hadn't had so much evidence. Your Honor, Dave said during his rebuttal, this isn't about adultery or hurt feelings. This is about a systematic attempt to defraud my client of his life's work. Mr. Maddox has done this before, and he'll do it again unless he's stopped. The judge granted the restraining order and scheduled a hearing on the fraud charges. As we left the courthouse, Kyle cornered me in the parking lot. This isn't over, Miller. Yes, it is. You just don't know it yet. You think you're so smart, but you have no idea who you're messing with. I know exactly who I'm messing with. A two-bit con man who picked the wrong target. Kyle's face twisted with rage. For a moment, I thought he might actually take a swing at me. But then he noticed the court security guard watching us and thought better of it. We'll see, he said, and walked away. 3 days later, the state shut down Kyle's security company for operating without proper licenses. 2 days after that, his ex-wife's lawyer filed papers claiming he'd hidden assets during their divorce proceedings. And the day after that, Brooke moved out of the apartment they'd been sharing. She called me that evening. Kyle's gone, she said. Her voice was flat, defeated. Gone where? I don't know. He just packed up and left. Said the heat was too much? That he needed to lay low for a while? I'm sorry. No, you're not. She was right. I wasn't sorry. Kyle had gotten exactly what he deserved. What happens now? She asked. Now we get divorced. Properly this time. No fraud, no conspiracy, just a straightforward dissolution of marriage. And then what? Then you figure out your life, and I figure out mine. I really did love you once, you know. I know. I loved you too. Can you forgive me? I thought about that for a long moment. Someday, maybe, but not today. The divorce was finalized in March. Brooke got exactly what she was legally entitled to, half of our joint savings account, which wasn't much, and a small settlement for her contribution to the household during our marriage. She didn't get any part of the business, since she'd never been involved in it and had actually tried to defraud it. I heard through the grapevine that she moved back in with her mother and got a job at a different department store. Kyle never came back. According to my private investigator, he'd moved to Florida and was working on his next mark, a recently widowed real estate agent with substantial assets. As for me, I threw myself into the business. The shop was doing better than ever, partly because the local news had picked up the story of the fraud attempt, and people liked the idea of supporting a small business owner who'd fought back against the con artists. Rico got promoted to shop manager, and we hired 2 more mechanics. I even started dating again, a nice woman named Lisa who taught elementary school and thought it was charming that I could fix anything with an engine. 6 months after the divorce was final, I was closing up the shop when a familiar black F-150 pulled into the parking lot. My heart rate spiked for a moment, but then I saw who got out. It wasn't Kyle. It was a sheriff's deputy I knew, Tom Bradley. Hey, Anthony, got a minute? Sure, Tom. What's up? I wanted to give you a heads up. Kyle Maddox got arrested in Tampa last week. Fraud charges, similar to what he tried to pull on you. Is that so? Yeah. The prosecutor down there called, wanted to know if you'd be willing to testify about his pattern of behavior. Absolutely, Tom smiled. I figured you'd say that. You know, what you did, fighting back like that, it probably saved a lot of other people from getting scammed. I just protected what was mine. Well, whatever you call it, it was the right thing to do. After Tom left, I stood in my empty shop, looking around at the tools and equipment I'd worked so hard to build. Everything was exactly where it should be. Everything was running smoothly, and for the first time in months, I felt genuinely at peace. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Lisa. Dinner at 7? I'm making lasagna. I smiled and typed back, I'll be there. As I locked up and headed to my truck, I thought about the lessons I'd learned over the past year. Sometimes the people you trust most are the ones who'll hurt you worst. Sometimes being nice is mistaken for being weak, and sometimes the best way to fix something broken is to tear it down and start over. But I'd also learned that fighting back doesn't make you a bad person. Standing up for yourself isn't revenge, it's justice. And sometimes the people who underestimate you give you the greatest advantage of all. I drove home through the quiet streets of my neighborhood, past the house where Brooke and I had once planned to grow old together, past the hotel where she'd betrayed everything we'd built, past the courthouse where I'd finally fought back. The funny thing about marriage is that it's a lot like fixing cars. Sometimes you can repair what's broken, and sometimes you have to scrap the whole thing and start over. The trick is knowing the difference, and I'd finally learned the difference.